Today I'm going to be going through different types of enemy AI in Game Builder Garage. Now all the AI I'm going to be showing off today is fairly basic. I will eventually be doing another tutorial on more complex 2D AI, and I'm only going to be covering 2D AI here today. If you're interested in a 3D AI tutorial, Loup&Snoop has a really great video on AI and enemy behavior in Game Builder Garage. There's a card in the top corner right now if you want to click on that and watch his video. He does a great job explaining all the mathematics behind doing AI, and especially in the 3D environment. But today we're going to be focusing on kind of some preset AI builds that you can do for your 2D game. The first enemy here is an enemy that walks back and forth and paces. He just has 1 hit point. All these enemies today will just have 1 hit point. I will eventually be doing a tutorial where I go over more complex AI with multiple hit points, different sprites for attacks. If you guys could leave comments down below suggesting enemy behavior that I can try and create, that'd be awesome. Enemy 2 is one that when we get in range, he will follow us. So once we're in range, you can see that he starts to chase us, and he will chase us until he catches up to us, basically. You can go ahead and get him. Enemy number 3 is one that'll pace back and forth. Dang, that was quick. Let me kill him and let me show you that behavior again. Enemy number 3 will pace back and forth until he gets within range of us, and then he'll start chasing after us. If we go ahead here and we get him to follow us, we can see that he catches up to us really quick, and then we can go ahead and stomp on him and get rid of him. And once we're out of range of him, if we wanted to have killed him, he would have kept pacing from where he was at. He would not go back to his original location. Enemy number 4 will randomly move between a designated range. So as you can see, he's kind of just randomly moving, and he ignores the player entirely. Now, if we attached a weapon to him, he could be throwing stuff at us, throwing projectiles at us, but he just kind of slides back and forth. Here we can see the different types and how they kind of build off of one another. As you can see, every single one gets just a little bit bigger. If you're interested in any more Game Builder Garage tutorials, I've got plenty here on the channel. I've got a lot for creating your basic player character, like your walk cycles and your jumps and your attacks. I've also got one on creating a HUD and multiple hit points and collectibles. So I'm trying to give you guys all the stuff you need to create the foundation to your game. And as always, feel free to subscribe to stay up to date on the latest Game Builder Garage tutorials. Let's go ahead and get started. Our very first thing we're going to be creating here is setting up our Sprite Cycler for all our enemy behaviors. So when the enemies walk, we want a sprite to be playing. We want them to have their own walk cycle. And this is also what your player sprite should have, but I figured out a way to clean this up quite a bit. So we're going to go ahead and remake this here. So it's going to use the same amount of node on pretty much, but we're going to grab a constant, set the first one to 0.1, go ahead and grab a counter. All right, go ahead and feed your constant into your count up. Then we're going to go in here and we're going to set a bounce and bring this all the way down to 1, because we're only going to be using 2 walk cycles per enemy, and also this Mario only uses 2 as well. Go ahead and grab yourself a digitizer. Go ahead and link those 2 together. Next up, go ahead and grab yourself 2 constants, your 0 and your 1. Now if you're going to have more than 2 walk cycles for your enemies, or more than 2 animations in general for your enemies, you're going to want to make sure this counter is ticked up. So right now we're only checking for a 0 and a 1. So you'll want to crank that up to, if you want 3, you're going to crank that up to 2, and then you'll have 0, 1, and 2, etc. You'll just keep going down the line. Next up, we're going to grab our equals, and we're just going to copy and paste those right there. Run your constants into the equals that they're beside, and then run your digitizer into the other leg on your equals. Next up, we're going to grab our wormhole entrances, and this is going to really clean things up. So we're going to do A, and then we're going to do wormhole B is going to be our other one. That way I know that A and B are my walk cycles. So we can see that both of those are pulsating at opposite times, which is perfect. That's exactly what we want. And I've actually went over here and I've cleaned up my walk cycle code. I'm only using 2 walk cycles, but we can see that we have A and B feeding directly into it. First up, we're going to be setting up our enemy that paces. Go ahead and grab a fancy object. I'm gonna go ahead here and grab the alien. And you can make all your enemies different fancy objects if you'd like. For today, I'm gonna make them all aliens, but you can go ahead and pick a fancy object that fits your aspect ratio of your sprite. Although it's not really gonna matter because the hitbox is not gonna be this big for our Koopa. Go ahead and make sure that these are the same size sprite, and they are. I've already got my sprites finished here, but make sure for all the ones today, you have them set to Z center and that everything else is off. That way they're gonna face the camera. If you have it set to something different, they will not. They'll be facing to the side. Let's go ahead and just link up our Koopas. So that way our textures are mapped to our alien. Let's go in and modify our alien here. Make sure it's not visible. We are going to make him destructible by only the destroy object. That's all he's going to be destructible to. Once you've got those changed up, let's go ahead and grab our wormholes here. So your wormhole exit, we need A. And then we're also going to need our B. Okay, now we have both our wormholes set in place and we can see that they're pulsating, which is perfect. That's exactly what we want. Next up, let's go ahead and set up our touch sensor and our destroy box for our alien. This is going to be our hitbox and our basically what kills the alien when we want him to die. Go ahead and grab a touch sensor, and we are going to make this whatever size we want his hitbox to be. And you can always grab a sprite here and kind of overlay it. That way you can see, yes, this is exactly what I need it to be. I'm going to make it a little thinner than him. That way I can't activate him if I like jump close to him. Once you've got that set up, let's go ahead and open this up. And for now, we're going to leave it visible. That way we can actually see it. We want it centered inside the Koopa. Next up, check what. We're going to uncheck everything and set it to person. So that way when our player touches this box, it will trigger our destroy. Go ahead and link that up. Next up, we're going to grab our destroy object. This is what is going to kill our enemy when we touch him. Go ahead and link those together so when we touch this box, it outputs. Link it up to your alien so it's attached. On destroy what, let's make sure we have it set to alien. That way it'll destroy him and not us. I want it centered, and we're going to leave the invisible. That way we can see what's going on. And we can make this really tiny if we want. We can make it, I would recommend making it smaller. That way it kind of fits inside him because it's going to be perfectly centered in there. So as long as it's within the alien, we are good. Next up, we're going to have a bunch of stuff here that we have to add. Under connections, go to hinge connections and grab a Y hinge. Now this is going to ensure that that our enemy always faces the direction that it goes in. We're going to go ahead and link our blue to that. And we'll come back to this later. We'll have an input that we're going to have to feed in there, but for now, let's set this up. Next up, we need a moving object. I would recommend getting a moving cylinder. It can be whatever, it doesn't really matter, but I'm going to do a cylinder. That way we don't get it confused with our box. Go ahead and link that up in the settings of your moving cylinder. Let's go ahead and turn everything off. That way it's not destructible, not breakable. We want it to be at the bottom, so we're going to leave it at that. Make sure it's not solid, that way the enemy doesn't float. Over here with mode, go ahead and put it on speed. Next up, we're going to go to connections and grab a free slide connection. This will make sure that our enemy doesn't fall out of our axis that we want him to stay in. We want him to stay in the Z axis. We don't want him to move any other direction. Link the bottom of that up to your moving cylinder. In the settings of the free slide connector, we're going to go ahead and turn these both off. We want to make sure he's always on the Z axis. And the very last thing we need to set up down here is a simple object of a cylinder. This cylinder is going to ensure that everything here is active. If we don't have the cylinder here, then this slider will not be doing anything. So this is our anchor point. Go ahead and you can turn all this stuff off. We don't need it visible, solid, none of that. I am, however, going to say to make this kind of big, in doing some testing, for some reason the enemy would behave kind of weird if it wasn't about the same size. So for now, let's just make this big. You can make it smaller, bigger, you can mess around with that and see what fits your needs. The last thing we're going to set up is what is actually going to move our enemy back and forth. Go ahead and grab a constant. This constant is going to be your speed basically. So I want him to move at 0.6. Next up, we're going to grab a counter. Go ahead and link it into the up on the counter. We're going to go ahead and we're going to set this to bounce because we want our enemy to walk to the side, hit this edge, and then walk back, and then hit this edge, and so forth, and continue doing that. I'm going to set these to 45 and 45. This kind of defines our range. This, in part, with our map that we're going to set up next, will define how far he's going to walk. And I found that putting the starting value at around about the middle in between these 2 points, so 23, worked out pretty good to kind of fling him into the right direction upon startup. Next up, we're going to need a map. So go up to convert and grab yourself a map. In the map settings, I'm going to set this to 0.1 and then -3, 3. Now this -3 and 3 should define that he will actually be moving 6 blocks in total, back and forth. So in combination, these things here work together. This counter and this work together on how exactly he walks back and forth. So it's just going to take a bunch of messing around to see exactly how big you want the ranges to be. Under angle calculation, we're going to grab a position to angle. This guy right here is going to rotate our sprite whenever he turns around. We can just go ahead and we can grab an output from here and link the output up to your hinge connector. You can take the output out of either or. I found that they were pretty much the exact same, but if you're having issues, you can swap it around. Take the output of your map and link it up to the X direction on your moving cylinder. If we go ahead and hit play, we can see that our Koopa does exactly what we want. He paces back and forth within this range. Here we can see he kind of jiggles around. If I go ahead here and increase the cylinder to just something absolutely stupidly big, we can go in here and we can see that he actually doesn't wiggle anymore. Like, he just spins around like normal. So I'm really not sure what that cylinder has to do with it, because it shouldn't affect how he turns. He should still turn the exact same, but for some reason that cylinder does have an effect. So if you're experiencing issues with your enemy, increase the size of that cylinder and see if it helps. And you can always put it down here and make it however big you want it and keep it underneath your world. It doesn't need to be up here with him. Next up, we're going to work on enemy 2 here. We can just go ahead and we can copy and paste what we've got here. Obviously I'm going to change my sprite though, but a lot of this code is going to stay the exact same. Alright, so here I've got the gist of it. We can go ahead and we can delete this setup, because that was only for our path that we were doing. We're going to go ahead and leave all of this the exact same. I'm going to go ahead and link my new sprites up. And then this one we want to be, it'll follow us once we're within a range of the enemy. So to do that, we're going to need to grab a touch sensor. Make it as big as you want. I'm going to make it the full size, or the full width it can be. I would recommend doing height-wise pretty big too, but for the sake of my comments and stuff, I'm not going to make them that tall. In the settings on your touch sensor, go ahead and turn everything off and only put on person. If you forget to do this, it will fly towards you because it'll constantly be detecting that there's a box or a circuit cylinder or a sphere inside of there. Go ahead and link your touch sensor up to your moving cylinder. So we're going to move our touch sensor right up to there. Next up, we're going to grab a location sensor. Now this location sensor will be mapped to I would map it to your moving cylinder. You can technically map it to the alien, but he's already going to have a ton of stuff on him. So I would link him up to your moving cylinder. Next up, we're going to need to detect where the player itself is at, because we need to have a value to walk towards. So here we can see I've got a location sensor for my player, and that is linked directly up to my person. Here I've got 2 wormholes. The only one we're really going to be using today is X, but for the future I've got enemies that will actually like jump with you as you're running. They'll like pathfind the same as you, and those will use Y. But for today, we're just going to be using this X. Now that we're back here, let's go ahead and grab our wormhole exit, and this exit will be for X. Next up, we're going to need a calculator because we're going to need to do some calculations here. Let's grab a minus. Link your X on your enemy's location sensor up, and then your X on your player's location. Next up, we're going to grab a multiply. Link one end of your subtraction into your multiply. This other import for your multiplication calculator will go into your touch sensor for your enemy. The last thing we need to grab is our map. Go ahead and link that output up. Right here are the settings that I'm going to be using. So this defines your speed. Just play around with it until you find something out. I would only adjust this bottom one very slightly. Even 1.5 is pretty high, but it depends on the size of your sprites. But 0 and 1, 0 and 1.5 is what I'm going to be using. And make sure this is disabled. Go ahead and link your map up to your horizontal position on your angle. And lastly, link your map up to your moving object's X, just like before. Alright, here we can see we've got our shy guy. He just stands there. Once we walk in range of this box, he will start to chase us. You might have to flip around your sprite, like I have to here. What I'm going to do instead of flipping that around is I'm going to flip around my alien's position. I'm going to rotate his Y to minus 180. That way it flips him completely around. If we go ahead and hit play, we can get past our Koopa here. And we can see our shy guy. And once we get in range, he follows us. And he looks the right way. And if I wanted to kill him, I would have jumped over him. He would have turned around. Alright, enemy 3 is going to be a combination of the first two. So I went ahead and I copied my second one right here. The only thing we're going to need to change right now is delete this X. Link your subtraction to your map. And go ahead and move that closer. Now I'm going to run over here and I'm going to grab some of the code from this. Whoop. And I'm going to grab these 3 here. Now that we have this, I'm going to go in here and I'm going to grab another multiplication calculator. We're going to need 2 of these, so I'm just going to copy it. And grab yourself a knot as well. Go ahead and tie your knot into this first calculator and then map into it as well. Next up, we're going to grab an output out of our bottom map and put it into our bottom calculator. Then we're going to go down here to our touch sensor and grab your outputs, put one to your knot and then the other one to this bottom calculator. So that way when we are not inside of here, it will pace, and once we are, it'll do this bottom line of code. For our angle, let's just go ahead and grab our output of our bottom map, put it to the horizontal position. Make sure that nothing is linked up to your moving object right now, and then take the outputs of both your calculators and send them down to it. So here is what our code should look like. If we go ahead here, we can see that he is pacing, just like he should be. And if we get in range, he will start to chase us, just like that. And let's go ahead and stomp on him. Next, we'll be covering this random position enemy. Here we can see that these are the randomly generated numbers that he's going to. So this is 1, and this is 32. The code for this guy is pretty different than all the other ones, so you can just go ahead and copy your very first enemy. This guy does not need a touch sensor at all, so here's what we've got. We have our exact same setup as before. Mine are just shifted around a little bit from moving them. The first thing we're going to want to do is grab a constant. We can leave this set to 1. Then we're going to go ahead and grab a timer. Link those up. I'm going to go ahead and set my timer up to 2. This will be how often you want him to move around. So every 2 seconds, he's going to pick a new spot. But you can set that up to every 5 seconds, every half a second, however much you want him to move. Next up, we're going to grab a randomizer. Go ahead and take the output of your timer, link it up to the very first one on your randomizer. This randomizer is going to set your range. So I want him to move from 0 to 32. That's what I had set before. But if you want him to move a really far distance, you can set this way up. Lastly, we're going to go ahead and grab a map. Go ahead and link the output to your map. And here's what I have my map set to. I have 0 to 54, minus 6, and 6, and disabled. This minus 6 and 6 helps to set that range as well. There's a lot of factors that kind of cross over and overlap that need to be adjusted, but this will help achieve what we want. Next up, we're gonna go ahead and set up a speed for him. Let's go ahead and copy these two. Now, whatever you have these two set to is what you're gonna want these ones to be set to, because these are gonna play along at the exact same interval. So this is set to 2 seconds, so this is set to 2 seconds. Next up, we're gonna grab a counter and a map. I have this counter set to a starting value of 29. This once again helps to set where it is in the level. On our map here, we can see that we have 0, and 72, -2 and 2, and then disabled. Adjusting these values here adjusts the speed and how fast he'll accelerate as he's traveling back and forth to different points. We're going to go ahead and link our constant to our timer as well as our up. And then every 2 seconds we want to reset that, so we're going to send this value up to our counter. Link your counter to your map, and then we have this set up. Next up, we're going to need to detect where the enemy is at. Go ahead and grab yourself a location sensor. We're going to need 2 of these, so you can just copy it right there. Go ahead and link this top one to your alien or your moving object, whichever. They both count for the same value. And for your bottom location sensor, go ahead and link that up to your cylinder. The randomizer needs the cylinder to know its home location. And lastly, we're just going to need to grab some calculators. So we're going to grab 2 subtraction calculators and then a multiplication. Go ahead and link both x values into your first subtract. Link your map output into your next one, and then your subtractions into each other. For our multiplication, let's go ahead and grab one input from our subtraction and the other input from our map. Let's go ahead and take the output of our multiplication and link it in to our moving object. Now for our hammer bro, I don't really want him to rotate back and forth. So right now he looks like this. He doesn't turn around because I want him always facing this direction. But let's go ahead and set up our angle for him. Let's just go ahead and link our angle directly into our X. And here we can see that he moves around and faces the direction that he's headed. Thank you guys for watching. This world is available for download if you'd like to download it and mess around with it and kind of see how everything works here. So go ahead and check that out if you are interested, and I plan on having another tutorial on some more complex enemies at some point in the future. Keep those levels coming at us. We're really enjoying them. We're having a blast playing them. I hope you guys enjoy seeing everyone else's creations, and keep up the great work.